Hey everyone, back tuning into today's video. It's Bank Holiday Monday at GazWebVids.com, which means only one thing: we're doing a historic video. I try and do the historic vids at GazWebVids on bank holidays, and today we're going to have a look at, well, the winter of 1978, 1979. Now, it may seem a bit hard doing this on the August Bank Holiday Monday, but it's by far the most requested historic video that I've had, 78, 79. Many of you want to see this. I've been getting emails over the last few months asking when it's going to be appearing. I've been getting messages in the comment box and people asking when I'm going to do it. So here we go. This is it. The winter of 1978, 1979 is going to unfold before your eyes in a moment. Before I get on with the historic video, though, just say about the ads. There's video ads on my pages at GazWebVids.com. Hit play on with video ads. You'll be helping to support GazWebVids.com. Thanks so much for doing that. The video ad essentially pays the website. It allows me to sit here and talk to you via the website. So if you can get involved and hit play on the video ad in GazWebVids, thanks so much for doing that. It's going to be quite a long video, so if you can't watch it all in one sitting, don't worry. It's going to be around the website for as long as GazWebVids is on the internet. Really, you'll be able to come back to the historical page and then find a link that takes you to the video for the winter of 78, 79. You can watch it whenever you want. So if you can't watch it all in one go, it's not going to be a problem. And just say enjoy the video, really. Now, before I get on with the video, I've just got to do a couple of things. I've got to say a big thank you to two websites. I wouldn't be able to do the historic videos at GazWebVids without these websites. We've got the Historic Archive from weathercentral.de, which gives us the charts, and there's a lot of information that you'll be hearing in this video from Trevor Harley's personal weather website. Now, the Historical Archive at Weather Central goes all the way back to January the 1st, 1871. You can find my link to weathercentral.de on my links page. Do check out the charts, go through from the links page, see all of these charts yourself, and any other chart that you want to see from this year back to 1871. You can while away many a happy, rainy, miserable bank holiday Monday at weathercentral.de. Trevor Harley's personal weather website has information in some instances going back to the Dark Ages, many hundreds and hundreds of years ago, even thousands of years ago in some instances. So a fantastic resource of information, Trevor Harley's personal weather website. I was only one when this was going on in 78, 79, so I have no memory of this, so a lot of the information you're going to hear in this video has come from Trevor Harley, and thanks very much to him for allowing me to use his information at weathercentral.de, for allowing me to use their archive of charts. So let's get on with the winter of 78, 79. We're going to start in the autumn. I'm starting on the 15th of September. I want to start in the autumn really just to prove that the idea you need a cold and wintry autumn to lead to a cold and wintry winter is not correct at all, really. You can have a very cold winter after a really mild autumn, because the autumn of 78 is a case in point. It was a very mild autumn, and here we are on the 15th of September 1978 with a very typical chart from that autumn, really. The low pressure is up to the north of Scotland. We've got high pressure reaching nicely from the Azores in towards many central western parts of Europe. Very mild west to southwesterly flow coming in across the country, and that really typifies, say, the whole of the autumn, to be honest, until we get through to the end of November when things do start to change. The central temperature for September 1978 was 14.2, so not excessively warm. It was above average, but not exceptionally warm. It gets warmer as we go on into October and November. Now, this is quite interesting. This low pressure here doesn't look like much, but this is the remains of Hurricane Flossie, and this is sort of a highlight really of September over the 15th and 16th as that low pressure runs in off the Atlantic. Here it comes moving in off the Atlantic, and on the 17th it forms a major storm system to the north of Scotland, and this brings 104 mile an hour gusts of wind to Fair Isle. So that is no doubt the highlight of the month. Very stormy day up across the north of Scotland, but most of the country is actually very quiet under this little ridge of high pressure. As we go out beyond this, that storm clears away and the high pressure just re-establishes as we go through to the 20th of September. On in towards the 25th, we end September with high pressure beginning to slip down a little bit to the south, perhaps allowing low pressure to turn it a bit more unsettled towards the end of the month. So I think as we get through towards the 27th and on into the 30th, low pressure is taking over here temporarily, bringing much cooler, much more unsettled conditions across many parts. Just to say, it was a mild month, not exceptionally so. I think we did have some pretty chilly nights really under those areas of high pressure down in the south, offsetting fairly warm days. But we do end September on a relatively cool and unsettled note. But that doesn't last very long. As we go through into October 1978, we find the low pressure clearing away to the east and high pressure is ridging back in from the Atlantic. And we're back to the same old pattern by the time we get through to the 5th of October, with high pressure to the south, ridging from the Azores in towards much of Western Europe. Low pressure being pushed off to the north. The Central England temperature for October comes out at 11.9, so a very warm month. Again, not record breaking, not exceptionally warm, but 11.9 is pretty much on the very warm scale for October. And it actually gets hotter as we go through in towards the 8th and on beyond that in towards the 10th and the 11th. This low pressure is stalling out in the Atlantic. High pressure is ridging through many central parts of Europe, and the winds are starting to be pulled up from the south. This begins to lift temperatures up toward the mid-20s as we get through to the 11th of October. A proper Indian summer. A lot of people say about September warm being an Indian summer. It isn't. That sort of late summer warm. October is really proper Indian summer when you get this sort of a chart with high pressure in many central parts of Europe and low pressure out to west. These southerly winds wafting up from the south, bringing the hot air up out of North Africa and Spain. That, when you get that in October, that is a proper Indian summer. And this day, the 11th of October, saw temperatures widely getting up to 25 Celsius, 77 Fahrenheit. That's very, very warm for October, of course. As we go up beyond that in towards the 13th, we start to cut off the very warmest of that southerly supply, but it's still very mild, and this high pressure temperature still into the upper teens to low 20s, with high pressure ridging through the country, keeping it very dry. It was a very dry month in October 1978, with some parts of southeast England hardly recording any measurable rain at all. A very, very dry month down in the south. Now we get through towards the second half of the month, and the high pressure begins to pull out a little bit into the Atlantic, just allowing a slightly cooler, more unsettled northwesterly flow with a few showers come down. This is my first birthday, by the way, the 17th of October 1978. This will be bringing showers to the north and the east. It will be feeling quite a bit cooler and fresher as well, but it doesn't last. The high pressure is coming back in as we get through towards the 21st of October, re-establishing the pattern. Winter is setting in now up over Scandinavia. We follow the icebergs back, winds going into the Arctic to the north. So yeah, winter setting in for Scandinavia, but elsewhere really it's high pressure from the Azores and the Atlantic ridging in, keeping it basically fair, mild and dry going through to 25th of October. No real change. It's cold up over Scandinavia, but elsewhere through Europe very mild and pretty dry under that continuous ridge of high pressure. The end of October, this is Halloween, 31st of October, so it's no real change. We've got the low pressure up to the north, whereas the high pressure is ridging through the Atlantic, keeping it mainly dry and mild. And I'm sure you're wondering what the fuss is all about, why I'm doing a historic video at this point. I promise you things will get much more interesting in a few more slides. Going through to bonfire night, no change. The high pressure is there through most of Europe, keeping it very mild, dry. There could have been a lot of fog under this high pressure central parts of Europe, but we're on the very mild side of it. But the icebergs back, they're still coming up, bringing up air from the tropical Atlantic. Could be quite wet for Scotland and Northern Ireland maybe, but really it's a dry, very mild sort of scenario to start November. No change through to the 10th. Again, the low pressure polar vortex is forming up over Greenland, but we're just locked into this very mild and dry weather under this ridge of high pressure that's centred over central parts of Europe. We move through to the middle of November and there's still no change. So an exceptionally mild autumn. This has been a cold and wet summer. This was a complete change on the pattern through the summer. It's a very mild and mainly dry autumn up to this point of long fetched southwesterly, bringing tropical air up from the Azores as we get through to the middle of November. I'm sure if there had been forums around at this time, most people would have been tearing their hair out thinking that the whole of the winter was going to be a write-off, but as I said at the start, autumn conditions have no real impact on what's going to happen in the winter. They are two distinct and separate seasons, and now things are going to start getting more interesting as we get through to the 20th. Just bringing some slightly cooler, fresher air in off the Atlantic, but nothing too dramatic going on. We've still got heights through Europe and stretched out into the Atlantic as well, but it's a little bit cooler now. And as we get through to the 24th, this is when we start to get the change. It happens very suddenly. You've got an active cold front along this elongation in the ice bars just here, moving southwards and eastwards across the country. That's bringing a band of heavy rain, and if you follow the ice bars back, much colder air is digging in behind that cold front. So moving through to the 25th, the cold front is pushing out of England and Wales, dropping the temperatures by many degrees Celsius. We lose the warm air that we've had through most of the autumn, replace it with something much more chilly. And as we move through into the 26th, well, then we're into a proper northerly wind then. Still got high pressure in the Atlantic, but notice how heights are suddenly dramatically dropping across most central parts of Europe where we had high pressure. Now we're generating low pressure, and that just intensifies as we move through to the 28th of November. A lot of low pressure there through many central parts of Europe. The high pressure is ridging through the Atlantic into the British Isles and starting to throw a ridge up in towards Scandinavia. The pattern is completely changing here. We're sending warm air advection up into Iceland and Greenland in the form of this southerly wind. The consequence that we're building this high pressure over the British Isles and that is showing signs of ridging towards Scandinavia. This trough, cold trough, drops southwards into central parts of Europe. And this is how we end the autumn of 1978 with a total flip around in the pattern. High pressure is forming over Scandinavia. We've got low pressure through most central and east parts of Europe where we have that warm ridge of high pressure, and easterly winds are trying to bring cold air into the British Isles off the continent. So in the space of about a week, we've totally flipped the pattern from the very warm pattern that had dominated the autumn to something much, much colder. Okay, let's get on with the winter then. And this is the chart for the first day of winter, December the 1st, 1978. We've got a 1040 millibar area of high pressure up over Scandinavia, but low pressure is out in the Atlantic trying to attack, and this is really what we see throughout most of December 1978. Actually, it's not a particularly cold, but it has a central temperature of 3.9, which is chilly but nothing desperately cold. And it's sort of a battle really between the high pressure to the north and the east and the low pressure in the Atlantic. It was a very, very wet month with lots of stalling weather systems. It's not until we get to the very end of the month that the cold air really digs in. So we have a look at the chart for the second. This is typical really, with high pressure out to the east as a blocking feature, got very cold air under there, but we're really under the influence of this low pressure, bringing lots of heavy rain in off the Atlantic. No doubt a lot of fog, a lot of dreary grim weather. There could have been some snow over the high ground of northern England and Scotland, but it's not a desperately cold scenario. This, as we move through towards the 3rd and then on into the 7th, it's still that battle continuing really. The high pressure is out to the east, the low pressure, deep area of low pressure at 960 millibars is out to the west. We've got these strong southerly winds coming in across the country, and not desperately warm, actually they're quite chilly probably, but it's very wet and there's a lot of low cloud and fog, grey, sort of grim weather going on through this period. Now, as we get through to the 12th, the high pressure starts to break down temporarily, so the Atlantic is really pushing through. But this is quite an interesting chart as we go through from the 12th to the 15th. The low pressure is dominating off the Atlantic, but it's an abnormal situation. Notice how flat the high pressure is around the Azores. Notice the black line here, which is the jet stream, is digging well south than you would normally expect in a typical sort of Atlantic driven pattern. So although low pressure is driving in off the Atlantic, it's not a normal sort of zonal Atlantic mild pattern by any means. This is really laying the foundations, laying the groundwork for what's going to happen through the rest of the winter. December 78 is very much one of those months that is laying the groundwork for what's ahead. Now, as we move through in towards the 20th, we're pushing that trough down to the south and the southeast, then trying to throw a bit of a mid-Atlantic ridge through the Atlantic with some sort of blocking developing around Greenland. Also, again, hints of high pressure building up over Scandinavia with these areas of low pressure around the Charles. Notice this very cold air digging in across western parts of Russia and northeastern Scandinavia. As I say, this is very much, if you was to have forums back then, there would have been a lot of disappointment, I suspect, because it was close at times to a really cold pattern, but it doesn't come off. But what is happening here is that the bigger picture is more interesting than what's actually going on over the British Isles. It's probably not that interesting, but the bigger picture is really laying the groundwork for what's to come. Notice this warm air advection again going up into Greenland, promoting this ridge of high pressure with this southerly wind pushing the warm air out of the Atlantic. You look at that and everything is sort of getting into place, sort of moving the pieces of the puzzle into place to start to unleash the winter in a few days' time. Move through to the 22nd, the charts are even more interesting. Got a proper area of high pressure up over Greenland, Iceland, more ridging around Scandinavia. We're under these low pressures though, so we're still generally quite mild and unsettled. And going through to Christmas Eve, low pressure really drives in off the Atlantic on Christmas Eve. It was a very wet Christmas. There was lots of flooding, particularly centred over northern England. There was some very severe flooding indeed up there. And of course, as it turns very cold towards New Year, a lot of that flooding freezes and we get very impressive ice flows developing across parts of northern England. I wanted to show some pictures of that, but I wasn't able to find any when I did a Google search, but they are on the internet. I've seen them before. If you have got any pictures of ice flows from around the new year of 78, 79, do send them through to me at gazworthvids@gmail.com. I'd love to see them. But here's the low pressure driving in on Christmas Eve, very wet, windy scenario, and as we move through to Christmas Day, well, again, it's low pressure all the way. We've got the ridging over Greenland and stretching that into Scandinavia, so it is cold there, but the low pressure is really holding sway, driving in off the Atlantic, bringing lots of heavy rain. And moving through to Boxing Day, that first low pressure clears away to the east. The next areas of low pressure gathering in the Atlantic. Boxing Day probably was quiet today with less in the way of rain, but as I say, very, very wet Christmas, phenomenally wet for some parts of the country. Going through to the 27th, the low pressure is coming back in from the Atlantic, bringing mild air up across England and Wales, but also it's turning very wet again. Notice the wings, the ice bars are trying to get into the east, but the far north of Scotland, that's where the cold area is pegged into the far north of Scotland, but it's about to start to unleash itself. All this very cold air is sitting over Scandinavia, just waiting to head in, and it begins to happen on the 28th. We start to drive these low pressure systems, and there's weather fronts strung out here, drive them southwards as the winds begin to back into the east. The ice bars are going into the east, and move through to the 29th. The cold air then is blasting in across Scotland in particular, but also beginning to dig down into Northern Ireland and Northern England. It's still mild for the rest of England and Wales, and very, very wet with these areas of low pressure, but the rain is turning increasingly to snow here across the north as those easterly gales blast out bitterly cold air in from the east. Here's the upper air temperatures. It's still very mild down in the south, but notice how cold it is across to the northeast Scotland. Look at all that cold air that's sitting to the north and northeast over Scandinavia. You can almost hear the theme tune from Jaws going there as that cold air is lurking and pushing ever closer towards us. As we move through to the 30th, that low pressure is diving away into the central part of the continent. The cold air now is digging in across all parts of the country. It's beginning to push southwards even into southern parts of England. And this area of low pressure is going to turn things really interesting for New Year's Eve. Have a look at the upper air temperatures. The cold air has progressed. We're now pushing the cold air down even into the south of England on the 30th of December. It's bitterly cold with sub-zero temperatures across many parts of Scotland, Northern England. All that rain, the flood water is freezing now across Scotland and Northern England. And here we go into New Year's Eve. Check this out. This is a proper channel low, a blizzard blasting across the country, particularly for England and Wales. This is the sort of chart that gets snow rampers and cold lovers mouths absolutely salivating, because we're bringing in this bitterly cold and gale force easterly wind. We've got the low pressure through the channel providing precipitation. Yeah, it's a classic blizzard going on New Year's Eve 1978 with drifting snow and blizzard conditions on those gale force easy wind. Maximum temperatures across many parts of the country are staying around -3, -4 degrees with a gale force easterly wind and heavy drifting, blowing, blizzarding snow. You can imagine just how severe the weather was on New Year's Eve. There's the upper air temperatures, just look at that. Bitterly cold air spreading in across the country, -15 isotherm is easily there. This is the last sort of great New Year blizzard that we haven't had one since. It's reminiscent of what happened in 62, 63, the New Year 62, 63. We've not had a New Year blizzard like this since. You would have to think we're probably due for something to happen soon. So going through to the severe January of 1979, men, and this is our last severe January. It has a central England temperature of -0.4 degrees. So it's a proper severe month. Any month that comes in with a central England temperature below freezing is a severe month. We haven't had one since. It's quite surprised we've not had one since, really. You would think that we probably would have done. It's a long time, of course, back to 1979. I would suspect we're probably due for one before much longer. Although there was a long run from 1895 to 1940 between severe months, between severe January. So we have had long runs before, but I think within the next decade or two we're probably due for another severe January. But anyway, getting back to the historic video, here we go. We've got the low pressure now clearing off into all central parts of Europe. The winds are backing into the east. We're losing the persistent snow, but we're driving in lots of really heavy snow showers and severely cold air. Just look at those upper air temperatures. -15 Celsius iceberg is right the way across the country. We've got drifting and blizzards taking place during this period. And daytime temperatures are struggling to get above -4, -5 degrees across parts of eastern England with that severe drifting snow. You can imagine how bad it was. It stays bitterly cold as we move through to the 2nd of January 1979. More snow this time for northern England and Scotland. Minimum temperatures are going well below freezing in towards sort of the minus double digits through this period with all that snow cover laying around the country. A proper blizzard goes on down across the channel lines of southwest England with this area of low pressure on the 4th of January, trying to bring milder air back up, but not able to, stalling within the cold air, producing blizzards down across the far south and the southwest with more drifting across many parts of the country. Going through to the 5th, that low pressure is firmly stuck there to the south of the country. More blizzards excuse me, down there. Now, as we get through to the 8th, things try to change a little bit in terms of the pack. We tried to turn it a bit milder, push westerlies through across the country. You look back and think that the cold month is breaking down. It isn't. The jet stream is still abnormal. So let's go through to the 10th and on into the 12th. Look what's happened. The low pressure just drives southwards again, pulling the cold air back in across the country, and there's more heavy snow driving through the country through this period. Now, after this, we get a bit of a build of pressure. This is when we get our coldest time of the winter, really, going through to the 13th. We're seeing temperatures through this period going very severely below freezing, and our actual lowest minimum temperature of the month and of the winter, and believe it or not, of the 1970s, which was generally quite a mild decade, occurs on this night, the 13th, when we go down to minus 24.6 in Carnwath at Strathclyde. So very severely cold now across country under this little ridge where we're overlaying all of that snow cover, and that stays with us into the middle of the month. We keep this ridge going into the middle of the month. Lots of freezing fog, so temperatures well below freezing, and severe pipe bursting frost by night as well. Go through to the 17th, and the high pressure is still there across the country, keeping it very quiet but bitterly cold. Moving into the 18th, the high pressure starts to push northwards and centres up over Scandinavia. The winds are going back into the east again, probably driving more snow showers into the east of the country. And then we start to get retrogression as we move through to the 21st of January. So you see that the pattern is sort of getting more severe as we're going along. This is something that typifies, if you've seen the other historic videos for 1963, 1947, this is something that's typical in these severely cold winters, that the pattern gets more and more extreme as we go along, whereas in most winters we get a week or two of cold weather, then the whole thing breaks down, we just push the Atlantic back through. In these particularly unusually cold winters, severe winters, the pattern just gets more extreme as we go along, and now we're retrogressing the high pressure from Scandinavia out towards Greenland, and guess what's going to happen next? We set up a big blocking feature over Greenland, and we start to develop areas of low pressure to the north and the east, so that by the time we get through to the 25th, we've got low pressure here to the northeast of Scotland, driving snow down across the country, heavy snow sweeping across the country, with this huge blocking area of high pressure up over Greenland, and the North Atlantic oscillations through the floor with these areas of low pressure driving through the Azores. This is sort of reminiscent of the kind of charts we had through December 2010. Almost like the polar vortex is setting up across the British Isles and Scandinavia. So we're displacing that polar vortex from the Arctic and pushing it down towards the mid-latitudes. Going through to the 26th of January, where we've got low pressure here sitting across the country. I think at this point is probably very severely cold with nighttime temperatures. I would suspect there's some incredibly cold nighttime temperatures going on through this point. There's probably still snow around as well, although not perhaps as much as on the 24th and the 25th. We move through to the end of January, and the conditions start to moderate a little bit. We start to show signs of building a little bit of a ridge across Spain and Portugal as this area of low pressure begins to develop to the north of Scotland. So things are trying to get back to normal, and that takes us through into February, which isn't as cold as January. February 79 has a central temperature of 1.2 degrees. So it's a cold month, but it's not as severely cold as January. We're trying to drive the low pressures back in off the Atlantic through the first part of February 1979, but notice all this cold air is still entrenched, embedded up over Scandinavia, and that's going to be coming back later on in the month. So here we go through to the 8th of February 1979. Again, we've got this little ridge of high pressure. We've lost the extent of blocking. We haven't got such extreme amounts of blocking over Green, but we've still got enough. It's still very cold up to the north and northeast to be generating these areas of high pressure. And the jet stream is still trending southwards with this black line here, so the pattern is still abnormal. And we're going to start to try and drive the Atlantic back in to that cold air again as we move through to the 10th of February. Again, we've got the battle lines drawn, the ridges up to the northeast, severely cold air is sitting over Scandinavia, lurking and menacing, and the low pressure is out in the Atlantic, trying to drive the Atlantic air back in. So going through to the 12th, the cold air begins to dig back in again. Winds are going into the east and the southeast here with the ice bars off the continent. The continent is frozen and snow covered, so that cold air is driving in with these areas of low pressure pushing up, and guess what's going to happen? Another blizzard is on the way. So going through to the 13th and on into the 14th, the low pressure systems here are trying to move into the British Isles, trying to re-establish the warm Atlantic air, but there's so much cold air to the north and the northeast, it just can't happen, and these easterly winds are driving that bitterly cold air back in from the east with this area of high pressure over Scandinavia, really feeding in that severely cold air. Check out the upper air temperatures on Valentine's Day, and it's severely cold over Scandinavia, and that is pushing our way, and we've got big snow developing now across many parts of the country. So this is one of the most extreme charts you're likely to see in any winter, really. On the 15th of February 1979, we've got a gale force, or even a severe gale force easterly wind blasting in across the country, bringing severely cold air in, and there's drifting and blizzards going on again, very similar to the New Year scenario with these areas of low pressure. Look at the upper air temperatures, and the -15 ice firm is covering the country once again. So it's severely cold with, again, daytime maximum temperatures holding below -15, holding below -4 or -5, I should say, with minimum temperatures going down to -15 in some places. And we've got drifting blizzards across much of the Midlands, East and South East England. Actually, from the 15th to the 20th, much of the Midlands, East and South East England was cut off with the snow. That is how deep and severe that snow cover was. Moving through to the 16th, that low pressure clears away to the south. We're bringing in this strong easterly wind, so everything is still drifting around with that snow. But we're losing the persistent snow, but no doubt driving in heavy snow showers here on the 16th of February 1979. As we move through to the 20th, things do start to ease then. We begin to stall the low pressure out in the Atlantic. High pressure is beginning to reach back in across the country, and temperatures in the sun, which is strengthening now, are slowly but surely beginning to lift up, and we start to struggle above freezing finally across those areas, but have been sub-zero for several days from around the 14th to the 20th of February. And then the winter ends on a very quiet note. This area of high pressure over the country on the 24th, allowing a very slow and gradual thaw to take place. Still pretty cold by night with frost and ice, but by day we're getting above freezing, and a gradual thaw is taking place. Those areas that were cut off are beginning to get back into the land of the living, if you like. And we end the winter, this is the final chart for winter 79, with low pressure driving in off the Atlantic, probably bringing about quite heavy rain in this time, then cold air digging in behind, probably bringing snow showers to the north. That's not the end of the cold conditions though, because on and off through the spring it was pretty cold. This is a chart for the 15th of March showing lots of blocking again to the north of the country, around Iceland, Greenland, to north of Scandinavia. This low pressure producing more heavy snow, and moving through beyond that into the 17th again. We've got a proper blizzard here across the country, lots of blocking again across Iceland and Greenland. Gale force easterly winds, particularly from the north of the country this time, with this low pressure again, no doubt, produced a lot of snow. March 79 was a very wet month, but also a very snowy month. It was a cold month as well, with temperatures way below average. It stays cold into the start of April as well, with more severe frost and snow showers at times, and even going through into the start of May. This is the chart for the 3rd of May, when the general election of that year was conducted. Look at this, northerly winds have returned again, bringing more snow showers down across the country. There was a minimum temperature of -7 on the night of the 3rd to the 4th of May 1979. There was snow through the Midlands, so snow showers through the Midlands on the 4th of May 1979. So you get the idea that off and on, it wasn't continuous like it was through January and February, but off and on we do keep it really cold at times, even into the spring. A very unusually cold period from late November through to May, late November 1978 through to May 1979, with the peak of the cold, of course, around January and February. From sort of New Year through to the middle of February, that was the core of the severe weather. Just want to leave you with a few pictures to see the effect of all this. This is a snowdrift, a car driving through a snowdrift. How deep is that snow? It's got to be over 12 or 13 foot, isn't it? Towering over that car. That's a snowplow that's gone through and pushed the snow up to the margins, but a really extreme chart. Look at this. This is a house buried by snow. I'm not sure what's gone on there. Presumably this is in one of those blizzards, either around the New Year or maybe the middle of February. Absolutely buried. That house, not sure where that was taken. Could be on the continent, maybe. Looking at this picture, it's quite a nice picture. This is a colour picture from 1979, and again a car being dwarfed by a snowdrift. Look how the snow is piling up outside people's doors and windows. Makes you wonder how you get around, doesn't it? How you get outside your back door or your front door with snow drifting like that. But of course, it only takes a day or two for it to start to pack down. So that's how these severely cold countries like Canada and Russia get on the go. It only takes a few days for the snow to pack down, but that's a pretty impressive looking picture, if ever there was one, of snow. And then, of course, when we get the thaws, and there were interludes of milder weather, as I'm sure you established from the charts, when you get the thaw, you get the age-old problem of the floods. And here we have a high street, some kids being towed in a boat through a flooded high street. It was the same old story in 1947 as well, but when all the snow thawed, it thawed quickly in March 1947, had to go somewhere. It couldn't go into the rivers, it thawed too quickly, so it went into the streets, and there was tremendous amounts of flooding. So some things never change, do they? So that's it. Hope you enjoyed the historic video looking at winter of 1978-1979. Hope it's brought back a few memories. If you wasn't around then, hope you've enjoyed seeing those very extreme charts. We will, I'm sure, see charts of similar severity at some point. It would be nice to have a blizzard like that over New Year, I must admit. I'd love to see a blizzard like that through Christmas or New Year, and it'll happen one year. It's all happened before, it'll all happen again. Everything is cyclical. So one of these days we'll get a blizzard like that around the Christmas to New Year period, and it'll be very exciting when it happens. Hope you found the video interesting. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, thanks for sticking with it. I know it's a long video, so thanks for keeping with it, and enjoy the rest of your Bank Holiday Monday. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.